Hello and welcome to the 12th in this series of Django screencasts called Django from the Ground Up. In this episode, we're going to be adding media capabilities to our website, and we're also going to be learning how to turn a completely fully created website and add Ajax capabilities on top of it. So the first thing we need to do is look at our settings file and figure out how we're going to enable settings or media for our development. And so the first thing we got to remember is that projector is the directory where our project is located, and that's set dynamically. And then we can dynamically set where the media root is located, which is just the single directory underneath our project directory called media. And then for development, we've got a media URL called localhost:8000/media. And so localhost is going to be obviously for development and won't work in production. When we're in production, we're going to have something like http media dot startthedark.com, something like that. But for now, we've got our localhost, and then also admin media prefix. I like to have the admin as a subdirectory of media, just that it seems like that's sort of a better paradigm than making a separate directory just for the admin media. That's just my preference. And so then the only thing we need to do after that is we need to go into our URLs and import settings right here, and then go down here at the bottom and add a media path here that we look for media, we select everything after that, all the way until the end. We call this generic view called django.views.static.serve, and we give it a document root of settings.mediaroot, which we actually defined right here dynamically. And then I like to add show index is equal true, just to make sure everything works. Now, if we go ahead and remove this line, and then we go back to our website and reload the page, we'll see that I don't have any of my media. It's all 404ing. There's no way that the server can or that the client can know about that media. But if we go back and we re-enable that, when I refresh the page, the media shows back up. Now, this is obviously not going to work in a production server for any amount of real load. So what we're going to do is when we deploy it, we're going to have a much more lightweight media server that serves just the media, and then we're going to explore ways how we can get around the actual Django part that's serving the media right now for our development. So if we look in our base template, we'll see that what we're doing is I have a variable called media URL, which is in all of our templates through our context processors, and that gives us what we set right here in settings as media URL right there. So it's very easy to just reference that variable and use that in our templates and make everything go from there. So down at the bottom, we've got all of these JavaScript includes. So you may be thinking, what are all these JavaScript things and which ones do I need? So let's go take a look. Right now we're in our project directory, and as you can see, like we've specified in our settings file right here, we've got a media subdirectory. So if we go to that media subdirectory, you'll see that I have a CSS, an IMG, and a JS. I like to separate them out in those three things, just to keep things in a good sort of taxonomy. And so what we're interested in here today is the JavaScript. And what I've got here is global, which is right now completely blank, and we're going to be building that out as the screencast goes on. We've got jQuery, we've got jQuery.form, the form plugin for jQuery, we've got a live query plugin, and we've got a PNG sort of IE7 hack thing that's awesome. Thank you, Unit, for coming out with that. Anyway, here are the websites where you can get it. jQuery can be found at jQuery.com. The form plugin can be found here. And then I'm not going to be demoing live query today because it's used for various other things in the site and not necessarily the Ajax stuff. But you can get that here, and it's an absolutely excellent plugin, so I highly recommend checking it out. So here, let's go back to the project here, and let's figure out where do we go? How do we take this non-Ajax complete website and turn it into an Ajax website. So first of all, let's just demonstrate how this works right now. Doing some screencast recording. If we click create an event, it looks like somehow... Oh, so I was messing around with the code a little bit before we started the screencast, and I changed some stuff. So I actually deleted one too many lines here. So here, let me add that back so we make it really clear. Here is a little line that adds the message to the user's message set so that we can display that on the next page load. So let's see if that worked. Create an event, and there we go. So the event was posted. That's what I expected to see the first time. So what happened is, as you can see, we typed our event, we hit create event, and it reloaded the page, checked for any messages, and added it to the list of my events. But what we want to be able to do is have this Ajax load that event and dynamically insert it into the HTML. And we won't need to have this message because you'll see it happen. So let's figure out how that can happen. In Django, there's a really great method on the request object called isAjax. So if request.isAjax. And the way it finds that out is that there's some headers that all of the main JavaScript libraries add to their requests, and you can detect it using that. So anyways, if it's an Ajax request, we're going to do try attendance.objects.get event equals event, user equals request.user, and that's it. And then we're going to say attending equals true. So if we did an error, else except attendance does not exist. So we did error, so we're going to say attending equals false. And then we're going to just return what we usually return in the template inclusion tag, which is great that we created because we've got a template that just renders this little part right here. And we have to remember to include all the things that that template needs, so we'll do return render to response, and we'll say events, event.html. If you remember, that's the inclusion tag's template name. Event is event, request is request, attending is attending, which we got up here, and authenticated is going to be true. I'll put that on the next line because I'm anal retentive like that. And then we're going to say event num is 1, which is actually a CSS styling thing I've added. You can check out the source code. It's very trivial. And then the next place we want to go. So that handles the case where it's Ajax. The other case is that it's not Ajax, and we want to do this right here. However, this is all if the form was valid. If the form wasn't valid, if it's not an Ajax request, we're fine to just render it. But if it was an Ajax request and the form was invalid, we have to decide what we want to do. And in this case, I'm just going to do the simplest possible thing, and I'm going to say, let's just raise an HTTP 404 request.isAjax. So somehow it got to this point. We're going to do raise HTTP 404. Now, what we can do to fix that is we can add some validation on the client side, or we can have some complicated validation system. But for right now, I'm just going to do this, and we'll explore doing validation some other time. So there's also a great project by Alex Gaynor called Django Ajax Validation, which will automatically figure out some of the things involved with that. And so this is our global.js file, and jQuery has a great way to create these automatic onload events. And I did that in a really weird way just now. But yeah, it's a really great thing where you can just wrap a function inside of this jQuery alias, and it will automatically attach this function to the DOM onload event using some crazy performance things to make it faster and happen instantly. So let's figure out what we want to do. So here we can do something called, first I want to select our form, and I know that it's called event form. As you can see, this uses the CSS selectors syntax, and then since I know that in my base.html I've loaded the form library, I can just do Ajax form, and let me hit enter. Oops, there we go. And one of the things that form lets you do is pass in a bunch of these different options, and I keep doing this in a really weird way. But okay, so here we go. We're now in our options, and I want to say clear form is true. And then I want to say on success, function response text, status text. And we will say that I want to grab something called my event, which is the event. If we look here, my event is this ID. So this thing that in this case we actually have an event, but in another case, if I don't have an event submitted, it will say no event submitted yet. And we're going to fade that out fast, and then call this function. And this function will do my event.html, which will put in the contents of the my event ID this HTML response text, which is the rendered response from our Django view as received here. And then we're going to fade it back in. So we'll say my event, dot fade in fast. And that is all we need to do for that function. I'm going to put a semicolon here to seal the deal, and as far as I know, that should be enough to change our non-Ajax, completely standard Django application to use Ajax for this form. So let's test it out. As you can see, it went to the server detected that it was an Ajax request, loaded up the inclusion tag, rendered it, returned it back to the form. We got this callback function where we faded out the old one, we replaced the HTML with the new response, and we faded it back in. Super, super easy. You can also do something called before submit, which will take in any function or a function, and that function will take in form data, JQ form, and options. And what you can do is you can say var field length equals, and we'll say ID description from this guy will automatically include something called with an ID of ID description, and we'll say dot field value, the first value, and we'll say dot length. And we're just going to do something ridiculous. We'll say if field length is greater than 2, then return false. Otherwise, return true. And what this will do is if we return false in this before submit, it's actually going to cancel out the Ajax request completely. So if I reload my page, and apologies if you hear the background noise. Anyways, so I'm going to do something that's clearly longer than 2, and it didn't let it go through. And at that point, we can add an error message or anything else. But if you notice that if I do something that's just 1 character long, it lets it go through. So we can add any sort of validation that we want here, and it's super easy. So that is the basics of how you can take these a non-Ajax website and just very simply do some non-destructive things with the site and add Ajax functionality on top of it. So I hope that's given you a good idea of how you can do that, and I welcome any other ways that you've got to do it that are minimally intrusive and things like that. And I really hope that to see lots more of this type of work going on. So that's it for this episode, and I will see you next time.